Okay, Mike. Let's talk about Noah's Ark.
The boat?
The boat itself.
You want to talk about the boat?
Last video, you kind of brought it up. We had a kind of idea of what our model here is.
Yeah, we got the model. Still got the model right here.
Yep.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Before we actually talk about the boat,
Okay.
we got to figure out how they measured the boat.
Yeah.
Now, we got all this talk in the Bible about cubits. And on people, there's a lot of confusion about a cubit and what a cubit is.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I could have done that 2 minutes ago before we started. Anyway, so what a cubit is it's a measurement from the bottom of your elbow to the top of your middle finger, right? That's the length of a cubit. That's how they measured it. Not by my arm, but they had. But that was the original cubit length. That's how they measured the length of a cubit. So a lot of countries had their own cubits, right? And they all differed a little bit. Some were maybe 14 inches long, and some of the other ones are 22, 25 inches long. So, so there's a lot of differences. But there were two main cubits used in ancient times. There was a short cubit and a long cubit. Now, the long cubit was the first one, and then the short cubit came later. So sometimes when they in ancient talk, they didn't really have the word go get the long one, right? They didn't have that word. Just give me the long one. Yeah. So they said when they wanted the long one, they said a cubit and a hand's breadth. Okay. That was the term that was used, and then you knew that was the long one. So we have biblical references for this, and so we kind of know. Now in 2 Chronicles, it says, this is the foundation which Solomon laid for the building of the house of God. The length was 60 cubits. And then it says, by cubits according to the former measure.
Okay.
And so you know that what they're talking about is the longer cubit. Because the former one was the longer one, right?
The first one,
yeah. And now in Ezekiel 43, we got another reference here. It says, these are the measurements of the altar in cubits. And then it says, the cubit is 1 cubit and a hand's breadth. So, you know, by the passage here, that they're talking about the long cubit.
Right.
Right? In both passages. And so we got a picture of a cubit. Because a lot of people haven't seen a picture of a cubit. So bring this up. Let's see what we got. There we go. This is basically your tape measure. Your laser of 500 BC.
Ancient.
Yeah, 500 BC. It's basically like a beveled ruler, you can see. And this is what they use for their cubits. There's all kinds of these around. They got them made out of metal and wood. And
doesn't say Stanley anywhere on it.
no Stanley markings on this one. No, they hadn't come up. Yeah, that's pretty good. No Stanley on it. So that's what your basic cubit is anyway. And the long cubit, by the way, the ancient long cubit was 20.6 inches long. And so the model that I have here let's see if I can get this in some kind of a view where somebody can see it. Anyway, here's the model. This model was based on the ancient long cubit of 20.6 inches. And so this is a 1/12 scale model of the boat. And so in this model, the boat was 515 feet long. It was, 85.8 feet wide and 51.5 feet tall. So you got a pretty big a boat here. Now, we don't want to make a big deal out of these measurements. I mean, it could have been that the ark was 792 long. I mean, 492 long or whatever, right? You don't want to make a big deal of that. The main thing is that it was a big boat. Doesn't have to be exactly what we have figured here because it's hard to know an exact figure, right?
Right.
So we don't know, but we got a picture of a freighter that is just about the size of what Noah's Ark was.
Let me bring that up.
Yeah, and there it is there. You can kind of see the size. See, this is a big boat.
Puts it into our modern day perspective a little bit here.
It sure does. You can see this is way back with 1964, I think. And so it's pretty big. Now, if you can go back to our model that we have here. Now, this, I got another model that goes along with it. This is a 1/12 scale model. If I can hold this up here so people can see. Get that in there pretty good. There we go.
Yeah.
Like that. That is a model of a shipping container, like you'd see on a train or on a ship, if you live near the sea or where the shipping lanes are, you see these stacked up as high as can be, on those boats and everything. This is a shipping container right here. Now, if we put it on Noah's Ark, you can see it kind of disappears down there inside the Ark. It's about that size. So the Ark had the capacity of holding 522 of these shipping containers.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So you're talking about a really big boat. Now, the Sunday school pictures of Noah's Ark, and it has the window in the Ark, and it shows the lion's head taking up the whole opening of the,
Right.
Well, the lion would actually be, a little speck on here standing next to this. Yeah. It'd be pretty small in the scheme of things.
That's kind of crazy, man. 522.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at a train going down the track that passes you. I mean, maybe 100 on there or something. That's a lot.
So, yeah, it had a huge capacity.
Yeah. Wow.
It had, the Bible tells us that it had 3 decks. So there was a lower deck, a middle deck, and then an upper deck, and also had a roof covering. So that was the basic design of it. Some people think that this may have been designed with one of those holes in the bottom, kind of like the oil rigs, where there's a hole in the bottom, and the seawater actually comes up inside of it.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that that's how this was designed too, because it would have made it a lot more stable. And when it came time to clean out, they could just push the mess from the animals right into the water. It would have been a great design, and it's a possibility, but it's just kind of a speculation.
Right.
But it's interesting. Another interesting thing I found was that there's a more efficient size if you were going to make one of these. It's actually a little wider, maybe a third wider than this one, and about a third shorter. It's actually a more efficient model. But in testing, it turns out that makes a pretty rough ride. If you're going to have a smoother ride, you actually want to thin it out a little and then lengthen it. Mm-hmm. So if you were going to take a 377-day cruise, you're going to want it to be fairly smooth, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably why the design is the way it is.
Well, and you had life aboard, right?
You sure did. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're riding around with animals and people. And...
So Noah, the Bible tells us, was 480 years old when he started making this. Now, these ages, don't let these ages of things bother you, because a lot of people say 480, come on, right? Isn't that what you think?
Kind of, yeah.
Well, okay, yeah, sort of.
Too much of a problem with it, but some people do.
Because that's impossible.
Yeah.
Nobody lives to 480 years, right? But people get the idea that when they figure out this stuff like the flood, they use the terms which they have today to figure out how it was then. But the world then was entirely different than the one today. Wait until you see the next series, number 3 of this. It's fascinating, the stuff we're going to explain, and to kind of understand it more. But anyway, so 480 years. It took Noah 120 years to make this boat.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you get the idea, and you see in the movies and everything where he's making it by himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But there was lots of people around. And it may have been that he had hired help. His family could have been helping. He could have had hired people. He could have had 350 guys working around the clock on it for all we know.
Yeah.
Right? It's a speculation.
It doesn't tell.
It's a total speculation. I'm just throwing it out there because it's interesting. You don't really know, but that's a possibility. It doesn't really matter. There's no bearing on anything. Now, Noah had his 3 sons, and when the flood happened, his 3 sons were just about 100 years old. So when Noah started building this ark, his sons weren't even around yet. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know this. Mm-hmm. And so when Noah, get the picture, right?
Right.
And Noah's a busy guy. He's got his wife. He's got 3 kids. He's got this thing out back he's building on in the backyard. He's got kids. His little kids are running up and down like mine would. Running up and down crazy up and down the boat and trying to fix it.
Right.
Who knows what's going on, right? Anyway, so we got an interesting and fun historical reference to this, and this is also from Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, and he says that Noah was very uneasy at what they did. Here's this "they" again.
Right.
And being displeased at their conduct, persuaded them to change their disposition and their acts for the better. So Noah was preaching to them, right? But they weren't listening. But seeing that they did not yield to him, but were slaves to their wicked pleasures, he was afraid they would kill him, together with his wife and children, and those they had married, so he departed out of that land. So that's an interesting...
That's really kind of... Yeah, that's deep, man. Putting that together with the previous information we just covered.
Yeah, that's right. So, once again, that's historical information. It's not biblical, but we'll take it for historical information.
Okay.
So, the animals went into the ark. Everybody knows 2 by 2. But not all the animals. The clean animals went in 7 by 7. And what you mean by clean animal... Just a second. What that's doing on me. Okay. Clean animal now was animals that were fit for sacrifice and so forth, according to the Levitical laws. And so those animals, they went in 7 by 7. The other animals went in 2 by 2. And all the birds also went in 7 by 7. And so a lot of people have a hang-up about the animals when it comes to this. They say, you hear all the things, how could you possibly get 2 of each kind in here? Thinking in today's logic, right? There, you might have 200,000 animals you got to put in here. And you couldn't have 8 ships. You could have an armada of 8, and it still wouldn't hold all the animals.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right?
Right.
But what we're talking about is the base species of the species, right? So there might be 54. I don't know how many doves there are, kind of doves. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, there's 54 kinds of doves. Well, on the ark, you would have just had 2 doves. Mm-hmm. And all the other doves would have, or 7 actually, 14, because you would have 7 of each kind.
Right.
A male and female. But all the other kinds of doves came out of that. All the other kinds of elephants, dogs, you name it, and mice or whatever. All the different kinds would have come from the first base 2.
Right.
So when you figure that all out, what happens is when you run the figures, it turns out that there are about 18,000 animals on the ark. And of the 18,000 animals, if you average their sizes, and it turns out that the average size of the animal is about the size of a sheep. So if you run the figures on the boat, that turns out that the animals would take up only about 1/3 of the space of the entire boat.
Yeah.
There.
Right.
Right? 1/3 of the space.
Right.
Now, I personally believe that it's likely that the animals were on the lower level. Because this is where you may have had, if the theory is true, that you had that opening space in there, you would have kept them down there. You could just shoveled everything right into the hole.
Yeah.
Right? So you may have had the animals taking up the whole bottom story. And then you had the second story, you could have had food, because you needed food for the animals. You needed food for yourselves. Remember, they're on the ark 377 days. That's a lot of food stored up for 377 days. Mm-hmm. They would have had to go to one of these stores we got here, survival places, to get all the little pills and all the little bottles and stuff, and the fans that you can crank up and the radios you can. Well, anyway, so the second story would have, the radios and all that stuff. I'm just kidding around, but anyway, the food and all that would be on the second, and then on the top level you would have the quarters for the people. You'd need spaces to exercise. You need water for 377 days. There's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, no kidding.
Turns out there's plenty of space for all of that.
Yeah.
Plenty. So that's fascinating. It's not at all the way you think of it to be. So let's see what we got here. Now, now it turns out that God brought the animals in to Noah. Noah did not go out and get the animals. A lot of people have the idea that Noah went out to get the animals. And it had to spend a lot of time. And how was he going to get animals from Africa? How was he going to get animals from Australia? Right? This is the way we think today. But at that time, we may not even have had continents. They may have just been all together. A lot of theories suggest that's the case. And I believe that's the case too.
Yeah.
But, so, we got a verse here that I want to read. This is Genesis 6:19. And it says, "And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, and keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds after their kind, of animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind." It's interesting to think that they also had bugs on the ark.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Snakes and bugs and spiders.
Right.
2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. That's what it says. 2 of every kind will come to you. And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. Thus Noah did, according to all God commanded to him, so he did. So the animals came. And if you had big animals, like, say, elephants or giraffes or what have you, it may well be that smaller ones came. Maybe babies or yearlings or whatever, right? Some people think of dinosaurs. There are some people think that dinosaurs were around at the time of the flood. Some people think that dinosaurs came onto the ark. And the same thing, they would think that there were baby dinosaurs on the ark. Now, I don't believe that. There's a lot of good people that do. And maybe that's the case. But I don't think the dinosaurs were there, and we're going to get on all that when we do our dinosaur show. Right. Anyway, turns out that the people were on the ark for 377 days. Some of that was sitting. It wasn't all there at the moving on the water. They went into the ark a little earlier than when the flood started, and they were in there for a long time afterwards until all the water was gone.
I gotcha.
Right? I mean, it was just kind of sitting on the ground, but there was still a lot of water. Noah lived for 350 more years after the flood. 350 more. Now, that's when the lifespan started going down. We'll see this in our next session on number 3. You got to see number 3.
Yes.
There's a lot of great stuff there, and a lot of great pictures and everything we got on number 3.
I'll put in a link there for everybody.
Okay. Now, this is Noah lived 350 years after the flood. Now, did you know that Noah was still alive when Abraham was born?
Yeah, you don't think of that, really. I mean, that's kind of a...
Right.
That's a long time.
As a matter of fact, Noah died when Abraham was 58 years old.
Yeah.
And we get all this information from the genealogies and the ages there. But, he was 58 when he died. So, when you have... now, the Jews, they have tradition that they got the written Torah from Moses. And they got an oral Torah. And this oral Torah is known as the Mishnah. And this they passed down orally from one generation to the next. And so you have this tradition of these things. That's why the Israelites that went into the Promised Land, the 12 spies, they said, we even saw the Anakites there, because they'd been told the stories.
Right.
And some of these guys at that time, their grandpa knew Abraham. That was around when Noah was around.
Isn't that wild?
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the stories that passed down are not that far from each other, right? Isn't that fascinating, huh?
It is.
So, now we got some historical references to what happened to the ark afterwards. And these are fascinating because this adds something to the story, and it also adds to the legitimacy of this whole thing. Even though this seems like it's impossible, as you can see as we're going through this, it's not as unlikely or as impossible as you think when you know more of the facts. So, here we go. So if I can find a way to read this over this giant boat we have sitting on the in my way. Okay. Genesis 8. It says here that then the ark rested in the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. The mountains of Ararat are in ancient Armenia, modern day Turkey, is where we're talking about here. And by the way, the Lord gives us the specific date. And whenever the Lord gives us a specific date, you know there's something to it. And it turns out this date that we're given here, the 17th day of the month, let's see, no, the 7th month, 17th day of the month. Turns out that this is the very day that Christ was resurrected from the cross.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Now the Bible does this, you see this kind of thing all the time in the Bible, where these dates match up and line up and all this kind of stuff, and it can be dangerous because you can get people starting to mess around with numerology and all kinds of nonsense that you shouldn't bother with. But it is interesting to see some of this stuff.
Yeah, it is.
But it turns out that day is the very day where Christ is resurrected. Wow. So that's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Because you have the very day when the ark rests and mankind is ready to start out anew. And then in the future, 2,000 years in the future, it's the very day where man starts out anew. Mm-hmm. Because the Christ now has died for you, right?
Right.
So there's all kinds of correlations between the flood and the ark and between Christ. Yeah. We could be here for an hour listing all of the things.
That's cool, though.
I didn't do that. Next time, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so now we'll go to the next one. We got a guy named Berosus, the Chaldean. Now, you probably never heard of Berosus, the Chaldean, but if you lived in 200 BC, this was the guy.
Really? Okay.
Right. Now, this guy here, he says he has a quote about the ark. Now, he wasn't around for the ark because he's 200 BC and the ark was well before that. He says, it is said, there is still some part of this ship in Armenia at the mountain of the Chaldeans, and that some people carry off pieces of bitumen, which they take away and use chiefly as amulets for the averting of mischiefs. Mm-hmm. Right? Bitumen, now this would have been pieces of what you call tar and kind of a mixture of asphalt kind of mixture, right? Bitumen would have been pieces that are keeping the wood together with.
Right.
And it makes sense that people would use it as good luck charms and that kind of thing, right? That's what Berosus says in 200 BC. Well, now, Nicholas of Damascus. You probably never heard of Nicholas of Damascus.
No.
But if you were around in the first century, Nicholas of Damascus, this was the guy.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm kidding around, but
no, it's all good.
He definitely was a historian, and he has mentions the ark, and this is what makes it significant.
That's cool.
He says, there is a great mountain in Armenia over Minyas called Baris, upon which it is reported that many who fled at the time of the deluge were saved, and that the remains of the timber were a great while preserved.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
That is.
So you got the story of the flood in both these guys, and not just the story of the flood, but also they say the boat is said to be there, and it's said to still be there, parts of it. The last one I have here is Josephus. This is the first century Jewish historian. He wrote this around 90 AD. And he said, the Armenians call this place the place of descent. For the ark being saved in this place, its remains are shown there by the inhabitants to this day.
Ah.
Now, there are a number of places around the world today that say they have Noah's Ark. And there are mounds in the dirt and what have you. And maybe some of them are, maybe one of them's right. I don't know. Or maybe the ark is totally gone by now, which is likely the case, I think. But some people think it may, could be around. Pieces of it could be around or whatever. But normally, pieces are taken away for other construction projects. Especially, you look at the old Roman ruins and so forth. There's hardly anything left except the biggest stones because it was hard to move, right?
Yeah.
All the little stuff got all taken away.
You would think that maybe even Noah did it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Being that it was made of
wood.
wood.
The first thing to take apart to use.
And they would have had, everything was new. They would have had smaller trees and everything. And here you got this giant chunk of wood. Right. Hey, why don't we use some of the boat up there? We got to build all this stuff. I mean, my wife needs a new sewing room or whatever. Where are we going to get the wood from?
Exactly.
Well, how about when one of his kids say, hey, why don't we go get it off the boat? Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. So anyway, it's probably, you're right. You're probably right. It probably was torn up, but it's speculation. Yeah. It's fun speculation, but just speculation.
It's fun to talk about.
So throw up the map. We got a map of Armenia. This is ancient Armenia. And you can see it there, the kingdom of Armenia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's see here. It shows right on the map. There it is, just pretty much right in the very center there. It says Ararat over the M in kingdom.
Right here.
Ararat. Yeah. That is the area. It's not. The Bible doesn't say that it landed on the mountain of Ararat. It says in the mountains of Ararat. So it landed somewhere in the basic area. But the mountains of Ararat is right there. And that's the ancient map. Now bring up the modern day map and you can kind of get an idea. Now there's Turkey. Now, way over on the eastern side, it is there. You'll see Ararat. Do you see it?
I'm looking.
No.
A lot of small letters.
Oh, there's Armenia to the more modern day Armenia to the right of Turkey, all the way over to the right there. You can see it there. See Armenia?
Yeah.
There's Armenia, but just across the line.
There it is.
You see it there? Yeah. Right. It's just across the line. That's where it is today on a modern map. That's the mountains of Ararat.
Way over on the line there.
Yeah, it's way over there. But anyway, it's fascinating to think about, and it's fascinating to talk about because this happened. And We've got historical evidence, biblical evidence that this was a real thing, and even archaeological evidence when you consider the other things, that this was actually a real thing. So this is fascinating and fun. Now, tune into the next one, because the next one we're going to say how the flood happened. This is going to be fun. There's going to be a little speculation and so forth, but we're going to discuss how the flood could have happened, because there's a lot more to that, too, than people think.
Yeah, and we got lots of cool pictures and
yes, we do.
Examples and stuff for that one, too. So, all right.
Let's get to it.
Sounds good, Mike.